everybody? Michael Cohen here with you on the Sports Talk Nation. It is going to be one of those podcasts, folks, where I just can't take it anymore. Let's discuss it. Michael Cohen here with you again. We are back here on the Sports Talk Nation, and for the first time really this season, we have an opportunity to talk really extensively about both the Giants and the Jets because their results on Sunday could have an effect on one another, especially when it comes to coaching searches, especially when it comes to the draft, because now things are, well, a little bit different than they were just a few hours ago. Obviously, I'm not even going to discuss what happened between the Jets and the Bills. It's not even worth it to me to sit here and waste my time to break down a 40-14 loss to the Buffalo Bills. Here's what I will say about the only thing I will say about that game is this. For the second straight week, and really since the Jacksonville game a couple weeks ago, we have been on this run wondering, maybe you bring back Aaron Rodgers, maybe you run it back with him. That's been kind of the story here, but we have another game for the second straight week where we sit there and say, maybe running it back with Aaron Rodgers and company maybe isn't the smartest move after all. And when you're seeing Tyrod Taylor, granted in garbage time, throwing 2 touchdowns, including one to the guy who was the most unhappiest of all, and Garret Wilson, well, maybe the Jets would be better off going with somebody like Tyrod Taylor and moving on from Aaron Rodgers in 2024. The only reason I bring up that game on Sunday between the Jets and the Bills is because that storyline could play a role into what the Jets' future might be at this very important position, the quarterback position. And right now, Rodgers has the Jets over a barrel, not just mainly from the standpoint of his contract, and certainly if they should release him, trade him, there's going to be huge cap hit, as we all know, around $49 million, depending on how that gets adjusted over time. But there's going to be a huge cap hit if the Jets and Rodgers do break apart at the end of this season, sometime this offseason. So that's a storyline. What the Jets want to do at quarterback is a storyline. The unhappiness of Garret Wilson, who last week was very unhappy with the fact that he didn't get enough looks or touches of the football or even catches against the L.A. Rams. You have that story as he's potentially considering requesting a trade in the offseason. And then, oh, by the way, there is still that story that I think is still going to be a problem. I know that a lot of reports have been that the Jets are a desirable job, that the Jets are a desirable destination, and maybe that is the case. But when you have the story that the owner is meddling in things and that his kids are walking into the locker room and they're berating players, and you forget the Madden rating stuff, that aside was the bizarre part of the story. But just the fact that the owner and his kids are meddling in things, that in itself creates a situation where if you are a candidate for this job, you have to have a lot of questions. I've been saying this from the beginning. You have to have a lot of questions. And then lo and behold, the other day on Friday, as we were in the middle of this holiday weekend, you could see the snowman behind me, in the middle of this holiday weekend, the story that comes out via Brian Costello on the New York Post YouTube page, that there is murmurings and speculation out there that potentially the Jets could lose out on Mike Vrabel, who has been targeted as their top head coach candidate. That the Las Vegas Raiders could be circling to get Vrabel. Now, think about this for a second. And I know we could debate, which spot is more attractive. Are the Jets more attractive because they have, talented players? Are the Raiders, And I understand that that there are fans out there who want us to think that the Jets are a more attractive place. Think about this for Raiders. You got Las Vegas. You got Tom Brady there, who Vrabel was a teammate of for a very long time in New England. You got potentially a high draft pick. And I know the Raiders kind of blew that a bit today by winning their game against the New Orleans Saints. And there's questions about, where they're going to be in the draft. And that'll also come into play with the Giants. We'll get to them in a minute. But they have potential to get a franchise quarterback, potentially maybe having to trade up or having one fall down into their lap in either Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. Those are the top 2 quarterbacks coming out of this draft. So you have that as a consideration. Yeah, there is a few things to like. And potentially, if you're Vrabel, maybe, as it was reported by Costello, you get a little more power. A little more power as in control of the football program and the football team. Is that going to be the case with the Jets right now, who are looking for both a GM and a head coach, and there's a report that maybe the Jets hire the head coach first, then the GM. All kinds of crazy things what the Jets want to do. But the fact is this, when you look at the Jets and you look at their situation right now, and the questions of whether Aaron Rodgers is going to be back or not, that is hovering over this franchise. And that's why I have to say, maybe the best thing they can do is just move on. Bite the bullet and move on. Make a Tyrod Taylor your quarterback for next year in 2025. Maybe you draft somebody in second, third round. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just go run it back with guys like Adrian Martinez and Jordan Travis, who we haven't heard or seen from this year because of his injury from his last year in college at Florida State. Maybe run it back with those three guys and see what happens. The free agent market is not that attractive. So you have that hovering over this franchise. And again, the stuff with the owner just really bugs me. So when you look at this franchise for the Jets, I cannot sit here and tell you it's an attractive place. I can't tell you they're in an advantageous place. If they're going to lose out on their top head coaching candidate, potentially to the Raiders, who are not exactly in great shakes either, especially with Mark Davis and the way he runs things. And you're about to fire a defensive-minded head coach to hire another defensive-minded head coach less than a year after hiring that one. The Raiders have their own issues as well. But there are things that make that more attractive. Sometimes, as I say, you go with the devil you know, this being the case that Tom Brady's over there, if Mike Vrabel does go there, then the devil you don't. And that's the question of what it is with the Jets and their entire situation, all the drama that's around them and all the headlines that are around them right now. We'll see how that plays out. But let's just say they do lose out on Vrabel. He goes to the Raiders or maybe even the Patriots. There's been a lot of talk about whether the Patriots want to stick with Jared Mayo or not stick with Jared Mayo. And if the Patriots ever became available, I could certainly see a Mike Vrabel going up there because, again, that's his team. And that would make the most sense, obviously, for him. So we'll see how that plays out. But let's just say they lose out on him. Where are you going to go next? Obviously, you look at some of the other candidates out there, like Aaron Glenn is out there, a Ben Johnson, who I don't think is going to end up with the Jets at all. He's probably going to end up, maybe with Chicago or elsewhere. As far as first-year coaches, I've heard Liam Cohen's name mentioned, who is the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Do the Jets really want to go down that route of a first-year head coach? Or do they go with another retread? And the retreads aren't exactly names that are going to jump off the page and excite people. Arthur Smith, Matt Nagy, those are two offensive coordinators with two right now fairly successful teams, Nagy with the Chiefs and Arthur Smith with the Steelers. But when they were both head coaches, it was mixed results. Nagy with the Bears wasn't that great, although he did get to the playoffs. And Arthur Smith was not very good as a head coach in Atlanta. 7-10, 7-10, 7-10, each of his 3 years. That's 21 wins and 30 losses. That's not good enough. Or do you look at Brian Flores, who had his issues with the NFL, got blackballed? Some will say he certainly got blackballed by the NFL, the way things went down with him and the lawsuit that he had over discrimination in his hiring process, and also with what went down there in Miami. But also didn't have great results down there in Miami either. Do the Jets want to go down that road with Brian Flores? In other words, it's not great pickings as far as head coach candidates who have had experience. If the Jets are going for a coach with experience, it could get dicey. It could get dicey. So if you are sitting there saying, where do I find hope? I don't know where you find hope right now. I don't know where you find it if you are a Jet fan. And if you want another example of the dysfunction that has been surrounding the Jets over the last several years, just take a look at the progress of one Sam Darnold. What a comeback he has had over the course of this season, coming virtually out of nowhere, taking over the job after J.J. McCarthy gets injured in Minnesota and has become an MVP candidate. When you see things like this, I feel good for Sam Darnold. I'm so happy to see that he's having success. But you just sit there and say, this is just another example of things that go wrong with regards to this franchise. And one reason why I sit there and say, when is this team ever going to turn it around? When is this franchise ever going to get it? Are they going to be able to allure a Mike Vrabel or somebody with a legitimate, big-time resume to come in here and turn around the culture? Is that going to happen? That is the question that I really have to sit there and ask. And that's the question that you Jet fans should sit there and ask, because the history has told you that in spite of all their best efforts, even bringing in a Hall of Famer in Aaron Rodgers, it doesn't necessarily work. The only thing here's what I would say. Start looking forward to baseball season at this point. Start thinking about the Yankees. Start thinking about the Mets. Start thinking about something other than this, because this is a total train wreck. And now, speaking of train wrecks, let's go over the Giants, because let's find out about the Giants and Giant fans. Giants actually show up and they actually play a great game. They beat a Colts team, knock them out of the playoffs basically, 45-33. They score the most points they've scored in a game in 9 years, since 2015. And you have Drew Lock with the best game practically of his life, with 4 touchdowns in this game for the Giants. And now the Giants slip from having the top pick in the draft to now potentially having the 3rd pick, maybe even the 4th pick in the draft. And that's all shuffling out because, again, teams that needed to lose didn't lose. The Giants won. The Raiders won. The Jaguars won. And now, the Patriots, who lost on Saturday, have the number 1 pick, but they may have their quarterback of the future in Drake May. But Giant fans are panicking. Oh my God, this is the worst win in NFL history. Because they lose out on the top pick in the draft again. The quarterback the Giants are looking for, and this is what the Giant fans need to do, take a chill pill. The quarterback you're looking for could still drop to you in this draft. And I know why people want to talk about, what happened a couple years ago with the Jets when they had a chance to get Trevor Lawrence and didn't get him because they won those 2 games at the end of the 2020 season. Here's the fact. There's no Trevor Lawrence in this draft. And even Trevor Lawrence hasn't exactly lived up to the hype down there in Jacksonville, and I know it's not all on him. He hasn't exactly lived up to the hype. So take it easy on saying, oh my God, this is a disaster. How could they win this game now? Take it easy. 1, it's not a great quarterback class this year. That's number 1. Shedeur Sanders, didn't have a great bowl game, has a lot of talent, but also, also when you consider his father, Deion Sanders, a big celebrity, big name coming out of Colorado. Is that going to be a distraction for the Giants? Do the Giants want to go down that road? And Cam Ward, who has a lot of talent, but also pulled himself out of a game the other day in a bowl game, and people are saying, well, the teams around the NFL are going to take notice for that. Quinn Ewers, out of Texas, there's nothing that jumps off the page. So the Giants could still end up with a Shedeur Sanders if you want him, if you're a Giant fan that desperately. Or they could end up with Cam Ward. They could end up with whoever they really do covet. I think the bigger story for the Giants isn't necessarily the draft pick. It's what's going to happen with the head coach and the GM. What's going to happen with Brian Daboll? What's going to happen with Joe Schoen? Because all indications have been, reports have been over the last week is a couple weeks that maybe John Mara will keep one and fire the other. Perhaps Brian Daboll on his way out. Joe Schoen may stick around. There was Joe Schoen was at the bowl game for Miami where Cam Ward was playing. Probably a sign that Joe Schoen is coming back. The same guy who, well, even with, you want to put blame on the owner as well, gave a lot of money to Daniel Jones and ended up letting Saquon Barkley walk. Perhaps he could be returning. And then you consider Brian Daboll. Is he going to be the head coach of this team? Does this win against the Colts save his job? If you're a Giant fan, I understand you want to get upset about the pick. But there is other things that have to be settled before that before that card's ever taken up to Roger Goodell in April that you have to worry about. Hey, look, you get a win, okay. Yeah, look, those guys are going to go out there. They're going to bowl. They're going to do everything they can to win games one way or the other. Good for them. Stop worrying about the draft pick, Giant fans. Worry about what the future holds for who's going to be your head coach and your GM. That's more important than right now. Right now, that's more important than that pick at this moment in time. Like and subscribe. Let's leave your thoughts below. We'll talk to you next time.